Good morning, everybody. It's Sunday morning here in London at the beginning of May, and this is Justin and Lizzie here for this week's conversation in the Turning Towards Life project. We welcome you all, those of you who have been with us for many weeks and months, and the many of you who are joining us for the first time. Some of you are live with us in our members-only Facebook group. Hello to all of you. We're glad you're with us. And we also know that many of you catch up with us later on YouTube and also on our relatively new podcast. So if you're listening in the car, on your bike, on a walk, in bed, wherever you are, afterwards, we're really glad to have you with us as well. Just a reminder that Turning Towards Life comes out of Lizzie, your and my work and connection with Thirdspace, and it's really an expression of everything we're up to there in so many ways. So if you're ever interested in any of this, you can always find all of the sources for Turning Towards Life at turningtowards.life, and you can find Thirdspace at our very lovely new website, which is wearethirdSpace.org. And that's all I think I want to say by way of introduction, apart from to keep on saying to all of you that if you want to come and learn with us, there are so many opportunities to do that in person. And the one that's on my mind at the moment is 3rd and 4th of June in London, when I will be leading a group of people through our Foundations of Coaching program, which is 2 days in London. And we would love to see you there. And that's it from me before we get started with this wonderful source that Lizzie's chosen.
I also wanted to say that tomorrow night, me and my lovely sister Holly Holden are going to be in Hammersmith for our little group that we run every month. So tomorrow at 7 o'clock in Hammersmith, we have a group called Turning Towards Love, and it's a gathering that is born of mine and Holly's wish to really share the sisterhood that we have and to be in community around all the things in life that might arise. So you're very welcome. We sit on beanbags and we listen to beautiful chanting sometimes and basically restore ourselves from whatever happened that day or that week or that lifetime. So you're very welcome to join us there. And the details of that are on our website in the section on our offerings, I think. Is that right, Justin? I think that's right.
In which website do you mean? On the Thirdspace?
We are Thirdspace.
Maybe, yes.
I think so.
And if not, check if that's the case.
If not, go to Recenter, which is RE:center on Google, and we're in their events page anyway. You can't find it there.
So Tuesday, the 6th of May, 2019, that
No,
is.
I think it's Monday, the 6th of May.
Monday, the 6th of May.
I
so often make that mistake. I get a day or a date one day out, and I'll tell you some other time all of the huge complications in my life that has caused from making that mistake again.
It's not. I think it's the first Monday of every month that we
Monday,
gather.
The 6th of May, 2019. If you haven't listening to this, in, July 2023, you missed it.
So the source for this week is this wonderful poem called Famous by Naomi Shihab Nye. And I was actually trying to find something by the wonderful Anne Lamott, because I wanted to, so when we're looking for sources, so you might realise that by now that Justin and I alternate the weeks of finding the sources for Turning Towards Life. And in the finding of sources, there are times when it's really obvious, or I write something, or something just is like lands on my desk, or someone gives me something. And then other times I think, okay, what is it that I want to really bring this week that is of somebody else's work? And I love Anne Lamott and I love her writing, but it turns out that I couldn't find anything that was kind of containable enough. So part of the thing is, how do I bring something that can be something that doesn't take us too long to read, that doesn't go on for hours and all that kind of thing. And so I was just researching her work, and this wonderful poet was someone that Anne Lamott said, oh my gosh, you need to go and find this lady and read all her poems because they're so great. So that's what I did. I took her advice and ended up reading lots of these beautiful poems. And then this one, for some reason, completely grabbed me, and I would say in one fell swoop humbled me into this beautiful space of reflection around being noticed and what that part of the human psyche that is. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm going to put myself on the line and say that I've often held this kind of strange fantasy of this big kind of boom happening and saying, like, as if like God or something would come down and say, right, you are the chosen one. I see you. You're an excellent something or other, and now things are going to be different or something. Like a kind of one of the parts of our, or my, I think it's other people too actually, but one of the parts of my psychology is wanting to be saved, wanting to all this to go away, please, and someone just come and whip me out of this particular reality and take me somewhere different where all of the desires that I have are fulfilled and all of the ways I want to be seen happen and all that kind of thing. And this thing really, really appealed to me in terms of what this word famous might mean, and how it also points to this place where for me sometimes life gets very complex and I suddenly think, I don't want this anymore, and I just want washing up and ordinary things to be the whole of my life, because I can't actually, this is all too much for me. So those two things really got triggered in me, those reflections, by reading this poem, and it feels to me like way more discussion than those two things can come out of this as well.
Yes.
So I'm going to read Justin, and then you can read after. Is that okay?
Of course.
Great. Okay, so this is called Famous. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anyone said so. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to the birds watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous briefly to the cheek. The idea you carry close to your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not at all famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing streets, sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous in the way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do.
I'm going to read it too. And before I do read it, I'm going to say something to everyone who's watching and listening to all of us that you often say, Lizzie, which is, see what happens if you just take a moment to settle yourself and to soften yourself before I read. You could take a few breaths, or you could, if you're sitting somewhere, you could just feel the way you're supported in your chair, or maybe whatever you're doing, you could sense into your own bodily presence for a moment. So this exquisite poem has so much to bring us if we'll let it. It's called Famous, and it's by Naomi Shihab Nye. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anybody said so. The cat, sleeping on the fence, is famous to the birds watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous briefly to the cheek. The idea you carry close to your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not at all famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing streets, sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous in the way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do.
It's such a comfort to hear this poem somehow. And as you're reading, what came to me is this, like, the dynamic of the big to the small, like the something small, like the tear is famous to the something big. There's a kind of a perspective thing in here somehow, and I guess that's the nature of fame. It's like we're singled out for something. Like, I don't know, Muhammad Ali, the many to the one. And somehow as humans, that's appealing to us in some way. And I feel like this poem, like, beautifully illustrates that and examines the notion of famousness, and then at the end totally gives a new narrative for fame that feels like a real opportunity, a real blessing, a real kind of, oh my gosh, a pulley. Like, there's something so dignifying about being the one that we are and named as the one that we are. And to live differently than wanting to be noticed for something that isn't just simply who we are feels like a very beautiful, relieving something.
Mm. It's, the poem really messes with the idea of what it is to be famous in a way that's so settling, I think. This is what you just said, but the line that really gets me every time is the boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to floors. Because there's something so ordinary and everyday about boots and earth. And I suppose that one of the things you talked about, as you introduced the poem, you talked about being humbled by it. And there's something so beautifully expressed here about how extraordinary our ordinariness is in this, that is caught at the end, that a buttonhole, to be famous as a buttonhole is really to be up to what buttonholes do, and to do so straightforwardly, but also with such grace and delight in just being a buttonhole or a pulley. And I find it incredibly settling to read. I think partly because I also get caught up in this salvation narrative that you were talking about, that's so prevalent in our culture, which is that not only one day will we be saved, and I need to be saved. I need to be saved from this to this. But the other part of being saved is some set of extraordinary circumstances will have to happen in order for me to be saved. So, either a sort of Messiah has to come, or a great rescuer, or a giant parent in the sky, or something like that. Or I will have to do something extraordinary. And when I have done the extraordinary thing, preferably something extraordinary that is recognized in our culture, not something else extraordinary, then I'll get saved. And actually, I can't remember who I was talking to. Well, I can't have been talking to this person. I must have been listening to something, because it was someone really super duper famous who was saying, perhaps unsurprisingly, who was saying, I really thought that fame would sort everything out, but frankly, all the things I struggle with, I still struggle with. And what's more, people run after me all the time to take my photograph and ask me things. So I'm sure there must be some very briefly some very lovely things about the kind of fame that we maybe even enduringly, but they don't. I think what this poem reminds me again and again is that actually what fulfills us really and has us meet the world and has us take up our places in the world is really none of those things, apart from the tiny handful of people in the world whose way of being in the world is to be famous. And maybe that is their way of being famous, like a buttonhole or a pulley, is to be well known, is to have a wide voice, and is to be seen by many people. But it is only one kind of fame, and it is only one kind of finding our place that can be deeply filled with life and dignity and beauty, all of which are rather sidelined or marginalized in our wider culture, maybe always have been sidelined and marginalized in wider culture, because it's so easy for us to want the one or the thing to happen to us, or to be blessed by those people to whom it has happened in some way.
Yeah, sometimes, I don't know, that makes me laugh, Justin. If anybody on the podcast can't see my face, but all the way Justin was talking, I was smiling on the verge of laughing, because for some reason, it really makes me laugh, this whole notion that we have of like, I've got to do something amazing. I mean, it's quite a thing, isn't it? This kind of pressure to go like, well, I've got to produce some extraordinary work of art or something to be recognized in this life, which is like, it's like really bonkers. And it's not what will produce art. The irony of it is that kind of like pressure and that kind of pushing and that kind of efforting is not going to make good art. Like, that's not the nature of the way creativity works or anything. And so it's a really kind of paradoxical situation. And it makes me think of, my life has been variously intertwined with musicians and performers, and really not in any kind of glamorous way, but in like, admin and organizing things, and also having a husband who's a drummer, and it always gets me what happens when you come off the stage as a performer, and backstage in a venue is the most like grotty, unkind place, when all of a sudden there's this wall of like the glamour of being seen has disappeared, and you're basically packing up for like 5 hours really, really boring things like little nuts and bolts and stuff. And it always has struck me as, and actually I remember going to Wembley once, and I knew somebody in one of the orchestras, and I went backstage to see them, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go backstage. And it was awful. It was so depressing. There's all these kind of people struggling away, trying to put their clarinets in a box and sweep up some stuff, and the environment is so uncaring and inhumane, that the backstageness of things. And that's the majority of the reality. The performance is for 40 minutes or whatever it is, but the rest of life mostly is scrabbling around with little nuts and bolts and putting things in boxes and trying to sweep up stuff that you don't want to get lost because it's really precious. And it really is a labor of love as well. So I think all the projections that we have on this being noticed aren't fulsome either.
Mm.
They're not the whole reality. I remember seeing somebody famous the other day in Soho walking around. I remember I was in New York once, and I saw Renee Zellweger in a cafe. And obviously I just, I love Bridget Jones, and like, I think she's an amazing actress and everything. And I happened to be overhearing her. I literally was sitting next to her on a table. And I remember how ordinary the conversation was, and how, she wasn't particularly all right either. And I remember thinking, my goodness, I really need to take stock of this fame thing and realize that just because we're seen and just because we are doing something great, as we're saying, it really is not what makes us happy. It's not necessarily important for this person here. And that's it's weird because I'm not really talking about fame. I'm talking about feeling noticed and feeling seen. And in a way, fame is an extreme version of seenness, of being validated.
Right.
And so it feels like my wish to be seen is proportionate to the lack of seenness I experience in myself.
Yes.
Like the less seen I feel just generally in my life, the more I want this big hand to come down and grab me and take me to another place.
Yes. Yes.
And the more I can be in relationship to myself as who I am, and to dignify myself and validate myself and be in relationships that nurture that piece of me that is true and real. And if I can bring my realness forth more, this dissolving that happens in Naomi's end of poem of being a buttonhole is so welcome. And the need for recognition and seenness diminishes. And I can practice that. I have that within my realms to appreciate myself and to give myself a really kind time and to be loving towards my parts that aren't so excellent or functional. And if I can do that for myself, the appeal of famousness, in inverted commas, diminishes and I can relax. And that's what I feel I'm just receiving from this incredible poem.
This is fabulous territory to be in, that you've steered us into, Lizzie, because it accounts for so much of the trouble that we get into in our lives, our attempts, our longing to be seen, which seems entirely human. Like, here I am, can anybody see me? Will anybody see me? And it's here beautifully in the poem, I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing streets. Like, yeah, of course, to be noticed. But our attempts to get seen in a very, very particular way are what get us into so much of the distortion and suffering in life, which is, I don't feel seen. Oh, I know this so much, and there's so much pain in it. I want to be seen this way. I want to be seen as kind or diligent or responsible or intelligent or thoughtful, or, you know, and I have all of my set of demands about how to be seen. And then it produces two very distorting effects. So one is how painful it is to not be seen in that way when I'm investing myself so much in being seen that way. And the second thing is how distorting it is of my intentions and of the possibility of bringing myself with straightforward generosity and responsiveness if I'm continually adjusting what I do in an attempt to get seen in this way. So it makes life into a huge, effortful, hypervigilant project. And I know I can do this if I'm, I suppose less these days than I used to. I'm pleased to say that there's been all kinds of opening with this, but when I'm tired or I'm feeling tender, or it's really easy to find myself in that. And so to know ourselves in a different way, your language of kindness is so helpful here. There's this lovely line at the start of the poem. The loud voice is famous to silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anybody said so. There's a way in which it really helps us to know ourselves as, but not in a comparative sense, not in a I'm okay because I can do this, or I can do this, or I'm better than that, or I'm, to even see if we can allow all of those to fall away and simply know ourselves as, here I am, a presence in the world, which is unique and particular and unlike any other. And here I am doing what I'm doing now, and not forgetting what I'm doing now and what I can do now. This is Naomi's last lines of the poem. I'm seeing if I can find in a way of talking about what happens when we remember ourselves without it being another version of giving ourselves the very thing that we want the world. So if I keep on going, well, I'm so kind and I'm so intelligent and I'm so responsible, and I'm doing to myself the same thing that I'm trying to get from the world. And ultimately that too is a path to suffering, because it's like trying to heave something up in order not to deal with what's underneath, which is, can I simply do the simple and terribly difficult act of acknowledging my own presence? Here I am.
Mm.
Being famous like a buttonhole or a pulley is.
Mm. Also, just in this last line of, because it never forgot what it could do. As you're saying what you're saying, it's really reaching me as well, that it's possible that, yes, we can do it to ourselves, of look how kind I am, look how responsible I am, all those kind of things. But it's also possible that we could be surrounding ourselves with tests all the time to show ourselves that we're not the thing that we think we should be. As in surrounding myself with people who are different than me in a way that proves to me all the things about myself that fall short in my perception of myself. And it's a systemic thing as well. It's like if I'm searching for the world to validate me in a particular way, part of the distortion is also that I surround myself with people who aren't going to see me for who I am, because of the way that that particular system is working. And I was talking to somebody the other day about how the people that they surround themselves with are the people that trigger the exact piece of their insecurity that is really difficult for them to tolerate and really, really wounding for them. And I really feel like there's a place in this world for us doing what we can do, and doing that really with our whole hearts, and not trying to do things or be things that are not ours, and trusting that who we are and the gifts we have are just the gifts we have, they're just the right ones, and that we don't have to pretzel ourselves into some other version of ourselves in order to be accepted or to be recognized by some system that we admire, or that comes from, you know, some cultural norm or parents or something. And so this humbling approach to life of being in ways that we can be, and not constantly falling short because of the ways we've set ourselves up to be in further, better, greater, more sophisticated somethings that leave us feeling inadequate every day because we didn't live up to it.
Very often, I know we've so often found this, you and I, in coaching and in teaching other people to coach, that the very thing that we humans get into feeling the absence of, and then we set our lives up that keeps on having us efforting to get the thing, like to be more courageous or to be more loving, and we surround ourselves with people who will, in one way or another, show us all the ways we fall short. That the very thing that we're putting so much effort into is what's right here already. You know, that I'm sensitive to being loving is so often because there is a way that I am already loving. And as you say, if I can pour my whole heart into it, if we can now allow ourselves to pour ourselves into what's here, so much is possible. And this is such a beautiful way that you had, Lizzie, of pointing into something that's in Naomi's poem as well, which is that a pulley is famous for being a pulley, not for trying to be a buttonhole, the other way around. And sometimes you could use such an argument as a way of sort of keeping ourselves down or keeping other people down. But what I hear you saying is, find out what's really true about us. Let's find out what's true about what we're able to bring, and bring that. Not to make it too small, but not to try and balloon ourselves into something that's far away from our own hearts and our own good intentions. That's that definition of humility that comes from actually from a Jewish spiritual path called Musar, which is that humility is finding our place and inhabiting it fully, not too much, which is our common definition of humility, but neither too little, I think is exactly what you're saying. And it takes some care and settling and trusting ourselves and knowing ourselves, and also finding other people around us who will see, if we can, beyond the conventional facade that we're all encouraged to take on, that says we must be forever trying to be saved or be the savior or be famous or whatever.
Yeah. And actually, just one more thing, Justin, because I'm recognizing the time. There was we watched the Avengers the other day, and there's a very beautiful moment between two of the characters. I'm not going to say who, because it might spoil the plot a bit for anybody who hasn't seen it, but it's the Avengers one where everything ends. I don't know what it's called. Anyway, it's the last one.
Endgame, I think it's called.
Endgame. Have you seen it?
No.
So there's a moment when someone says to another person, we always fail at who we're supposed to be. But I think something like the real marker of success is when we succeed at who we are. And it really was so beautiful, because it was in a lovely relationship as well, of somebody who really, really loved the other person, and the other person had believed that they were a failure, basically. And it really got me, because I thought, of course, there's a supposed to for all of us. I was supposed to be a doctor. I was supposed to be kinder. I was supposed to be a mother. I was supposed to be better at this. There's all these supposed to be's flying around in all of our lives, and in that we just miss the isness, the Lizziness, the Justinness, the who we are-ness, that actually is the very, very thing that we're yearning for, is to be ourselves.
That's such a beautiful thing to say. And I'll add one thing before we finish, which might be an ongoing inquiry. It certainly feels like it is for me, and maybe for all of us who are engaged in this conversation, is what happens when we give up comparison? Because it might well be that part of what gets us into so much difficulty is that we unwittingly find ourselves living a life of comparison, not only with others, but also with an idea of who we were meant to be.
Yeah.
So much suffering in that, and holds us back from, as you're saying, from wholeheartedly being who we are, a buttonhole or a pulley or someone who smiles at shuffling old men crossing the street. Oh, thank you as always, Lizzie.
Yeah,
sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, I was just going to say this is really beautiful, and thank you. That's all I was going to say.
I'm going to say the same. Thank you to you, and thank you to everyone who keeps on joining us each week. We're so glad to have you with us. We will be back next week. For those of you who are watching live, we're going to be at a slightly different time, because Lizzie is going to be in one time zone and I'm going to be in another time zone next Sunday. And we have a bit of wrangling to work out the time. So we will announce that in our Facebook group. And if you want to join our Facebook group, so you can join in the comments and watch us live, search for Turning Towards Life on Facebook, or go to turningtowards.life, where you can find all the links to get you in. We'd so love to welcome you there, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.